So in this video, I'm going to go over the 2.4 to 2.7 test review. 2.4 is over complex numbers and operations. This first part wants me to find the difference. Remember, this means subtract. So I'm going to write this out on my paper with the subtraction sign in the middle. Then from here, there's two things I can do. I can either do this by hand, which I'll do, and then I can also type this into my calculator, which I'll show in a second. So if I'm going to do this by hand, I want to distribute that negative, so that's going to change everything after the negative sign. So I have 5 plus 3i minus 2 minus 9i. Then I combine like terms. 5 minus 2 is 3. And then 3i minus 9i is negative 6i. Real numbers go in front of imaginary numbers. If I was doing this on my calculator, I just go type it in. I have 5 plus 3. And then to get I press second, and then the decimal has this tiny blue I above it. Then I close off my parentheses, minus 2 plus 9i. Close off those parentheses. And my calculator will give me 3 minus 6i, which is what I got. Next one says sum. That means add. So I'm going to have negative 2 plus 3i plus 5 minus 2i. Then I want to combine like terms. I have negative 2 plus 5 is 3. 3i minus 2i is just I. And again, I can double check on my calculator for this one. Negative 2 plus 3i plus 5 minus 2. So that one gives me 3 plus I, just like I got. Next one says products, and that means to multiply. Again, I can do this by hand, and I can type this into my calculator, so I'll do by hand first. If I'm doing by hand, I want to FOIL. I have 2 times 2, which gives me 4. 2 times negative 5 gives me negative 20i. 7i times 2 gives me 14i. And 7i times negative 5i gives me negative 35i squared. I'm going to combine like terms. So I have 4 minus 6i minus 35i squared. Remember, I replaced my I squared with a negative 1. So 4 minus 6i minus 35 times negative 1, which is 4 minus 6i plus 35. Combine my two real numbers. I get 39 minus 6i. If I do this on my calculator, I'm going to do 2 plus 7i, and then 2 minus 5i, which gives me the 39 plus 4i that I got on paper. 4i. So, because 2 times 5 is 10. So when you're doing this by hand, make sure you multiply correctly. These ones want me to solve by square roots, so this is where I'm going to move the number over to the other side. Then I have 12 equals 4x squared. I want to divide both sides by 4. I get 3 equals x squared. Then I take the square root on both sides. I get x equals plus or minus the square root of 3, because I can't go any further with that. The next one, I subtract 81. So I get negative 81 equals x squared. Take the square root. This one's negative, so that means I'm going to have an I in my final answer. And the square root of 81 is 9. So I want to remember plus or minus, and then I have 9i. On the quiz, lots of people forgot their i's, so remember to put your I on your test if you're taking the square root of a negative number. Same idea for number 6. I subtract 9 on both sides. I have negative 9 equals 25x squared. Divide both sides by 25. So I have negative 9 25ths equals x squared. Then I go to take my square root. So I'm going to have plus or minus. And then when I take the square root of a fraction like this, I take the square root separately. So the square root of 9 is 3. And the square root of 25 is 5. And I should have an I because that one was negative. This next one wants me to complete the square to rewrite the equation in vertex form. So what I want to do is I'm going to turn this y into a 0. And then I'm going to subtract 36 on both sides. Then I'm going to look for half of my b value, so I need to label my a and b. A is 1, b is negative 16. So then I'm going to have, I'm going to do this in red still. I have negative 16 divided by 2, and I want to square that. So that's going to give me negative 8 squared, which is 64. I want to add 64 to both sides. So I have negative 36 plus 64 equals x squared minus 16, x plus 64. On the left side, that gets me 28. And then on my right side, I can factor. I'm looking for what multiplies to positive 64 and adds up to negative 16. That is going to be negative 8. Then I just want to go ahead and move my 28 back over, so I subtract 28 on both sides. I get 0 equals x minus 8 squared minus 28. So my vertex form is y equals x minus 8 squared minus 28. My vertex is positive 8, 28. And my y-intercept is the c value from my original equation. So that is the 36. I have, this one is positive for my a value, so it opens up. That is going to be a minimum. And my minimum value is the y value of my vertex, which is 28. These next two want me to solve the quadratics by completing the square. So I'm going to start off by adding 82 to both sides. I get 82 equals x squared minus 24x. Label my a and b. So then I want to find half of my b, which is negative 12, and square that, which is 144. So I want to add 144 to both sides. This left side gets me 226. And the right side is going to factor to x minus 12 squared. And then I want to square root both sides. 226 is not a perfect square, so I'm going to factor tree this. That is 2 and 113. Which I believe is prime. So I have square root of 226 plus or minus equals x minus 12. I add 12 to both sides. I get 12 plus or minus the square root of 226. Okay, same thing for number 9. I'm going to start off by subtracting 13 on both sides. So I get negative 13 equals x squared plus 6x. There's no number there now. Then I want to label my a and b. My a is 1, my b is 6. And I'm going to do half of 6 squared, which is 3. 3 squared is 9. So I want to add 9 to both sides. On my left, that gives me negative 4. On my right, I can factor that to x plus 3. Squared. Then I go to take my square root. So when I take my square root here, I can take the square root of positive 4, that's 2. And because of that negative, it turns into I. Then I have plus or minus x plus 3. I subtract 3 on both sides. I get x equals negative 3 plus or minus 2i. Okay. On the back side, I have the quadratic formula, which remember is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So On this next one, it wants me to use the quadratic formula. My a is 1, my b is negative 16, and my c is 24. So I'm going to plug in. I have x equals negative from the formula, negative 16 from my b value, plus or minus, negative 16 squared minus 4 times my a value of 1 and times my c value of 24, divided by 2 times 1. So then simplifying, I get 16 plus or minus 16 squared is 256, and negative 4 times 1 times 24 is negative 96 over 2. 256 minus 96 is 160. So I want to factor tree 160. That's 2 and 80, 2 and 40, 2 and 20, 2 and 10, 2 and 5. I'm looking for pairs of 2's. So I have 2 pairs of 2's. So I have 16 plus or minus the square root of 4, because 2 times 2 goes on the outside. Then I have a leftover 2 and 5, so square root of 10, still over 2. 16, 4, and 2 are all divisible by 2, so this turns into 8 plus or minus 2 square root of 10. Same idea for number 11. My a is 1, my b is 3, my c is 4. So plugging in, I get x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root, 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4 over 2 times 1. So simplifying, I have negative 3 plus or minus 9 minus 16 over 2. Simplify even more, I get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 7 over 2. I can't take the square root of 7, but I can take the negative out of the radical. That is going to be negative 3 plus or minus I square root of 7 over 2. If I can take the negative out, I always should. The next ones want me to use the discriminant to identify the type and number of solutions for each equation. I need this to be in standard form. So I have x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 0. My a is 1, my b is negative 2, and my c is 1. Plugging into my discriminant formula, remember that is b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to have negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 1. Negative 2 squared is 4. 4 times 1 times 1 is 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. This is one real solution. On the next one, I want to move everything over, so I subtract 24x, add 19. So I have x squared minus 24x plus 19 equals 0. My a is 1, my b is negative 24, and my c is 19. Plugging in, I have negative 24 squared minus 4 times 1 times 19. So, I don't know these ones. 24 squared is 576. Minus 4 times 19 is 76. So that gives me 500. Since it is positive, I have 2 real solutions. On the last one, it's already in standard form, so I just need to identify my a, b, and c. Plugging in, I have negative 8 squared minus 4 times 3 times 12. Negative 8 squared is 64. Negative 4 times 3 times 12 is negative 144. So this gives me negative 80. Since this is negative, it is 2 imaginary solutions. On this next one, it gives me 2 functions. It wants me to determine when the equations are equal. So what I want to do is I want to set the 2 equal. I have x minus 3 squared minus 2 equals 2x minus 5. The first thing I want to do is square this out. That is, I'm just going to rewrite it. I have x minus 3 times x minus 3 minus 2 equals 2x minus 5. I want to FOIL. I have x squared minus 3x minus 3x plus 9 minus 2 equals 2x minus 5. Combining like terms, I have x squared minus 6x plus 7 equals 2x minus 5. Subtract the 2x, add the 5. So then I get x squared minus 8x plus 12 equals 0. Then I want to solve this. I'm looking for what multiplies to 12 and adds to negative 8. That is negative 6, negative 2. Set my 2 equal to 0. I get x equals 6, x equals 2. But because these are two variables, I have to plug in and find my y value. I can pick whichever equation I want. I'm going to pick the one without the squared. So if I do g of 6, I'm going to do 2 times 6 plus 5 minus 5. So that gives me 12 minus 5 is 7. So one of my answers is 6, 7. And I'm going to do the same thing for g of 2. I have 2 times 2 minus 5, which is 4 minus 5, which is negative 1. So 2, negative 1 is a point. I'm going to go ahead and plot these points on my graph. This part, 2.7, is on the no calculator part. So you will have to do this by hand. 6, 7, and 2, negative 1. So I know that's where those are going to cross. I know because one of my lines is linear that I need to draw a straight line. Give me a second to find my ruler. And then because this was in vertex form, my vertex was 3, negative 2. So I'm going to go plot that. And then I'm just going to connect those 3 points I have. And that's what my graph should look like. On the last 3, I want to simplify. So what I can do is I can write these out twice. I have 3x plus 1 times 3x plus 1. And then I FOIL. 3x times 3x gives me 9x squared. 3x times 1 gives me 3x. 1 times 3x is 3x. And 1 times 1 is 1. Combine like terms. I get 9x squared plus 6x plus 1. Same thing over here. So I have 2x minus 5 times 2x minus 5. FOIL, I get 4x squared. Negative 10x. Negative 10x plus 25. Then I have 4x squared minus 20x plus 25. Over here, I have x minus 12 times x minus 12. That gives me x squared minus 12x minus 12x plus 144. Combine like terms, I get x squared minus 24x plus 144.